Great. Well, we've been looking through, if you've joined us the last few weeks, we've been looking through Matthew's account of Jesus' life. And we're working our way slowly through it. Don't worry, we're not going to go through the whole thing in one go. We'll probably pause and take a bit of a break. But I hope you found it helpful. I hope you found it encouraging. And what we're going to talk about this morning is something, I suppose, which affects everybody in this room. There's nobody left out who isn't affected by it. And that is this: temptation. Whoever you are, actually, this morning, whether you've got faith in Jesus or not, you know what I'm talking about. Temptation is common to every single one of us. Actually, it's one of the few things in life in which we're all completely equal. Whether you're being tempted to have another custard cream or to yell at that driver in front of you or to betray your spouse, there are impulses at work in us that we just can't escape or explain. And we all know it. Everyone in this room has experienced it. Perhaps you've been wrestling with something last night or this morning. You need to know it's not unusual. But you also need to know that it's not unbeatable. You don't have to just curl up your toes and give in. Why not? Well, because there is a human being, Matthew tells us, who has faced the most powerful temptation that anyone ever faced. A temptation that tore through every part of his soul, but who won? The book of Hebrews says this. It says, we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. And so we're told, because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he's able to help those who are being tempted. Isn't that encouraging? He won. And if we're a follower of Jesus, we can win because he lives. So what it's just we do is this. We're going to read this passage from Matthew's gospel, and then we're going to just draw out a few things from it for us. If you've got a Bible, you might want to turn to Matthew chapter 4. Otherwise, it's going to come up on the screen here. It says this. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted there by the devil. For 40 days and 40 nights, he fasted and became very hungry. During that time, the devil came and said to him, if you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become loaves of bread. But Jesus told him, no. The scriptures say people do not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Then the devil took him to the holy city, Jerusalem, to the highest point of the temple, and said, if you are the Son of God, jump off. For the scriptures say, he will order his angels to protect you, and they will hold you up with their hands, so you won't even hurt your foot on a stone. Jesus responded, the scriptures also say, you must not test the Lord your God. Next, the devil took him to the peak of a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their glory. I'll give it all to you, he said, if you will kneel down and worship me. Get out of here, Satan, Jesus told him, for the scriptures say you must worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Then the devil went away, and angels came and took care of Jesus. Three things I want us to notice this morning. First of all, the source of temptation. Where does temptation come from? Secondly, the strategy of temptation. How exactly does it work? And then finally, the solution to temptation. How can we defeat it? First, the source of temptation. If you look at verse 1, the source is obvious. He, Jesus, was tempted by the devil, right? But in our society right now, according to a YouGov survey, about 80% of people deny that the devil exists at all. 80%. To them, he's just a funny little creature with little red horns and a pokey tail that people love to dress up as at Halloween. But Jesus says, no, the devil is real. He's real. And if you look at most societies throughout history, they would say the same as well. There's a very personal force of evil at work in our world. And what's interesting is that when some terrible atrocity happens, have you noticed this? What do people say? It's evil. It's evil. This is pure evil. This is sheer wickedness. And they tend to try to personify that. More than that, last Saturday night on Eurovision, more than 50 million people tuned in to watch, amongst other things, the Irish singer Bambi Thug. And those watching may not believe in the devil, but Bambi Thug does, because self-described witch who performed a song described as Ouija pop, during which they danced in a circle of candles, worshipping Satan. But the devil's also very powerful. Sometimes that's overt, but often you see that power in the various names that he has. Loads of names for Satan. Beelzebub, the Prince of Darkness, Molech. He's constantly changing his disguises. You watch any science fiction, there's always a shapeshifter, isn't there? And they can take on different forms. And one minute he comes at you as your best friend, and then the next he's the most terrifying monster. That's why the devil is also called the father of lies, because he specializes in lying and deceiving. He's two-faced. And what he wants to do is to get us to fall for those lies. But, and this is important, he may be real and he may be powerful, but he is also limited. Over the years, I've hung out with some Christians who have told me that Satan is everywhere. He's under the table. If I get a slight cold, Satan's given me the cold. If I've missed the bus, it was Satan who did it. He's got all the power. Friends, he hasn't got all the power, right? He's completely limited by the power of Christ. And we know that because who starts this story that we read? This is really interesting. Was it the devil who started this? No, look at verse 1. Then Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He's led by the Spirit. The Spirit allows Jesus to be tempted, but only for a period of time. I mean, a long time, 40 days, 40 nights, but then it ends. And how does it finish? Verse 10. Jesus just simply says, away from me, Satan. And the devil left him. So look, the devil is real, the devil is powerful, but he's limited. And we need to get the balance. Take him seriously. But don't be fearful that he's lurking everywhere. He isn't. He is contained by the living God. Martin Luther, the great pastor and theologian, once said that Satan is on God's leash. Great picture, isn't it? I walk around Hamworthy Park and there's always a dog barking at me. Always a dog barking at me. But it's on a leash. It's on a leash. So it can bark, but I just look at it and laugh. That's what Luther's saying. Yeah, the devil can snarl and gnash and tempt us, but he's on a leash. He can only do as much as God allows. And you see that in verse 1 as Jesus is led by the Spirit to be tempted by the devil. And at first sight, you might think that's a little bit confusing. Why does the Spirit, the Holy Spirit of God, seem to be working with Satan? Is he tempting Jesus? Well, it's confusing because that word tempt can also mean trial. It's got a kind of a double meaning to it. And what it means depends on who's doing it. Let me try and explain it to you like this. Imagine a coin, two sides to a coin, right? When Satan is behind his purpose is to make us deliberately sin. He wants us to fail. He tempts us. That's what he's doing, right? But when the Spirit of God is doing it, he wants to prove our faith. He wants us to succeed. He's testing us. Same action, very different motive. And that explains why the Bible can say we should count it pure joy when we face trials of many kinds. Why? Because it's a way of God strengthening our faith. But it also says no one should say when they're tempted, God's tempting me, because God never wants you to fail. He only wants you to succeed. So my friend Rodney Green gave a really good example of this. He talks about the chicken gun. Have you ever heard of the chicken gun? You ever come across the chicken gun? This is incredible. You may not want to go on a plane after this, but it's a gun that fires a hopefully defrosted chicken at aircraft parts, right? And the reason is because they're trying to prove that the parts, the aircraft, are strong enough to stand up to a bird strike. 350 mile an hour, bam, straight into your plane. It should be able to stand up to it, right? They're testing it because they want it to succeed. Do you get that? But you've probably also heard what's going on at Boeing recently. Somebody forgot to put the screws in a 737. Is anybody going on a plane flight soon? Oh, Carol Upton, okay. Look, they forgot to put the screws in the door of a Boeing 737. And you remember what happened when it took off? The door was tempted to fall off. And it did. Look, when you or I experience small or large temptations week by week, and we end up feeling wretched and ashamed and embarrassed that we failed again, remember this: Satan might be trying to destroy us and cause us to fail, but God's bigger, right? And his purpose is to be faithful to you. He wants you to succeed. He's there offering help in your time of need so that your faith will grow stronger. Okay, that's the source of temptation, right? What about the strategy of temptation? Because if we know the plan that our enemy is using, we've got a big advantage, haven't we? So what does Satan do when he comes to Jesus? What does he use to tempt Jesus? Well, if you look closely, you'll see that it's just three things: food, eyes, and pride. That's always the way he works. So loaves, right? He's using Jesus' bodily appetite. 40 days and 40 nights. You must be starving, Jesus. Go on, help yourself. Then the eyes. He shows Jesus a part of the temple high up where everyone would see him. Look, imagine how people would ooh and ah if you were to throw yourself off and then angels came and gave you this soft landing. You'd be an overnight celebrity, Jesus. And then there's pride. I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And that's important because this isn't a one-off. These three things run through the whole Bible. Don't believe me? Take the Garden of Eden. Satan appears to Eve and Adam and says, go on, eat the fruit. And what do? Well, they eat it, but why? Well, we're told they see that the fruit of the tree was good for food, pleasing to the eye, and desirable for gaining wisdom. Same three temptations Jesus faces: food, eyes, pride. Same thing happens to the people of Israel when they're led into the wilderness. We haven't got any food. You don't care about us, God. He sends them manna and quail. Oh, we're fed up living by faith. We need to see something with our eyes, a miracle. So Moses whacks the rock, and out of dry rock comes gushing water. Oh, Moses has left us. He's gone up the mountain. Let's create our own God, a golden calf, so that we can be like the other nations and be great. You see the pattern? Food, eyes, pride. And just so we don't miss it, the Apostle John sums it up right at the end of the Bible in his first letter. He says this, do not love the world. Why not? For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life comes from the Father. Not from the Father, but from the world. Do you see? Same thing. Can you see Satan's strategies are the same from the beginning to the end of the Bible and right up to the present day? In World War II, the Allies had a cunning plan. They cracked the Enigma code. That was the Germans' top secret code, and it meant that they knew what the Germans were up to. And because they knew, they could plan appropriately. This chapter, I guess, we got here is Jesus' own kind of Bletchley Park. He's cracked Satan's code. And he's showing us how it works. And he's saying, look, guys, it's always about sinful kind of desires in the body, a susceptible eye, and selfish ambition. And because he's a shapeshifter, well, Satan just kind of mixes it up a little bit for us, but it'll always be one of those three. So keep an eye out for it this week. Honestly. More than that, give some time to prayerfully thinking through where you are weak. Where does Satan get under your defenses? Why not chat it over with some Christians in your small group? Get them to pray specifically for you, then ask you, how did you get on? But there's one more master strategy that Satan uses in these verses, and it's honestly the most vicious of all. He tries to poison Jesus' view of his Father. Right before this passage, end of chapter 3, Jesus is baptized. You remember what happens? The Spirit of God descends on him, and a voice from heaven says, this is my Son, whom I love. With him I'm well pleased. God the Father is confirming who Jesus is, his beloved Son. And now, what does Satan do? 3 times he questions that. Did you notice how he says, if you're the Son of God? Back to his old tricks of lying. What does he question first? He questions God's provision, his provision. Make bread out of these stones. I mean, come on, Jesus. He calls himself your Father. But I mean, what father would give his son stones to eat? And yet, Jesus, here you are, no bread at all stones. God treated Israel better in the wilderness than he treats you. At least he gave them manna. And yet you, the beloved Son, are led into the wilderness with nothing. See? It's like Pete's story earlier on. A good father would give you good gifts. Does that sound familiar to you? God really loved you, then he would have provided you with a husband or wife, with children, with money, with home, a job, with success, with happiness. But in some of those areas, maybe he's failed. Ooh. So go and make your own bread, your own pleasure, your own success, because he doesn't care about you. That's what Satan's saying. And yet, what does Jesus say? He quotes from the book of Deuteronomy. He goes back to Israel's time in the wilderness, and he says, look, Satan, man doesn't live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. He will provide for me. I trust him. I know my Heavenly Father loves me. I know he's taking care of me, Jesus says, even though it appears he doesn't. Do we? Because we will always fail temptation if we doubt his love and care. Find ways of reminding yourself that he loves you, that he cares for you every single day. then look what Satan does. He challenges God's protection. He takes verses from Psalm 91, and he tries to tempt Jesus to test God's love and care for him by throwing himself off the temple. And remember, God uses trials to test what's in our hearts. Yeah, we said that earlier. We should never test what is in God's heart. We should know. So Jesus responds with another verse from Deuteronomy. Don't put the Lord your God to the test. Don't doubt that as a follower of Jesus, God is for you and he's with you. Now, I wonder whether you feel that God has wronged you in some area of your life, that he hasn't shown up, that maybe he's forgotten all about you, that he shouldn't have let this happen to you, that he doesn't care. A few years ago, Andrew and Rachel Wilson wrote a book, and it was the title that got me, really. It was this: The Life You Never Expected. Now, for them, they had 2 children. Both children are severely autistic. And it was tempting, they said, for them to say, God, it wasn't meant to be like this. Why have you allowed this? Show us you care for us. Show us you love us. Don't you ever feel like that? I do at times. And so what happens in Romans 8 is Paul gently draws up his chair next to us and he whispers in our ear. Listen what he says, right? He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also along with him graciously give us all things? He gave his one and only son for you, for me. What more do we want him to do to prove that he loves us? What more could he do? Preach that to yourself. Preach it when you feel that God has wronged you, but preach it to yourself all the time. He's given me his son. One day he will give me all things. Finally, the devil tries to question God's plan. And he says, look, Jesus, we both know that all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor are yours. I know that. So you can have them. I won't fight you. I won't struggle for them. You don't need to go to the cross to get them. You don't have to follow your father's cruel plan. I'll make it easy for you. All you need to do is just bow down and worship me. Have the lot. How about that? So tempting at times, isn't it, to think that our way is better than God's way. That's what Adam and Eve did in the garden. He's holding out on us. Let's have some of this fruit. That's what Israel did in the wilderness. They thought their plan was better than God. Don't you think that at times? I don't have to change my life to be a Christian. I can still do what I want to do. I don't need to gather with God's people each week. I can be a Christian and stay in my sins. God will be fine for it. He'll accept it. But he won't. His plan is the very best plan for your life. And right now, as I'm saying this, there is someone in this room who is tempted to argue with that because you're planning something. You're planning something in your mind. You know it's wrong. But what you're doing is you're reasoning all the time. That makes sense. That's the right thing to do. God would want me to do that, wouldn't he? Do you see what you're doing? You're thinking, I know better than the God who created me, upholds me, who died for me. No, you don't. Stop worshiping your own little gods and worship him instead. Submit to him. He's the king, not Satan. This is what we're up against, a vicious, ruthless enemy who lies and lies and lies to us about God. Are you believing his lies or are you believing the truth? That's Satan's strategy. Jesus exposes it for us. And so finally, here we go. This is what you've been waiting for. Here's the solution to temptation. What is the solution? Well, you and I can't do it. We can't resist it. It's impossible. On your own, we will fail. So here's the most important thing to do when you hear Satan's pathetic whining voice in your ear this week. Cry out to Jesus for help in your time of need. If you do nothing else, do this, because only he can help you. He is our champion. He's the new and better Adam who didn't fall for Satan's lies. He's the true Israel who went into the wilderness, was tempted in every way, but remained faithful. He's the Son of God who didn't doubt his Father. Where they failed, Jesus succeeded. He's the strong man who's bound up the devil. And so Hebrews tells us, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence. I left that out. With confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. See, Matthew doesn't want us to do the thing we always do, which is, all right, Jesus resisted temptation, so I can do it. I can do it. You can't. But you can with his Spirit in you helping you. If you cry out, he will help you. Quick fire round. Ready? Some other things. How about this? First of all, be real. What do I mean by that? People in recovery, they're taught halt. You come across halt before? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Those are the times that you fall for addiction, right? Look at Jesus. He must have been so hungry, so lonely in the wilderness. Take stock of that. If you're lonely, find a friend to hang out with. Get out of the situation, because you'll know you'll lose it if you're angry. Eat some chocolate. You never thought you'd hear that, would you, from a Poole? Eat some chocolate. Get some blood sugar in. Just get a good night's sleep. Unmask the tempter. When you've done all that, stop, see what the temptation is, open up the Bletchley Park Code, work out what the devil's targeting. Is it your appetite, your eyes, your pride? Is he trying to tell you lies about God? It's like you're up against an invisible enemy, and then God gives you these kind of special glasses to see him and spotlight him, and suddenly, okay, I know what you're trying to do. Use God's weapon. Deploy the weapon he's given you. Do you remember best film, Crocodile Dundee? Remember it? You remember it? Best scene in Crocodile Dundee? Mick's walking down with his girlfriend. Somebody comes up to him and says, "You got a light?" "Sure, mate," he says. The guy's face changes. He pulls out a flick knife. "Now, give me your wallet," he says. Dundee's girlfriend pulls back. "Mick, give him your wallet. He's got a knife." Mick smiles. "That's not a knife," he says. And with that, he pulls out from his shin, it seems, this huge hunting knife. He says, "That's a knife." Satan comes to us with his little flick knife. That's what he's going to do this week. Trying to scare us. But Jesus has given us the biggest hunting knife you could ever imagine. What is it? It's the Word of God. But we need to know it. Got to know Scripture better than Satan does. Do you? It's how Jesus defends himself. And if it's good enough for Jesus Christ, surely it's good enough for us. So memorize it. Get it in deep. If you're struggling with something particular, have a chat with some Christian friends and go, what verses should I memorize? Then tell Satan to get lost. Martin Luther had various ways of getting rid of the devil, which I'm not going to tell you now, but if you talk to me afterwards, I'll gladly tell you. But at one point, he just picked up an inkwell and he threw it at this imaginary devil. But he was right. Tell Satan to go away. Say it out loud and shout it through tears if you've got to. Get away from me, Satan. I am not yours. I belong body and soul to Jesus Christ, and he's more powerful than you. So in his name, I command you to leave. And then finally, look to the future and remember we won't always have an enemy. Jesus has won the victory on the cross. He's risen from the dead. He's coming again. And when he does, he will trample the serpent under his feet once and for all. We won't always have an enemy. The temptation won't last. But Jesus' reign will.